I've lived through storms that would have sunk most ships. But I'm still standing, and maybe that's why I feel compelled to share this with you. My name is Carolyn. I'm 58 years old. And this is the story of how I lost my daughter, or at least, I thought I didn't know, how the truth that almost destroyed me became the very thing that saved me. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma where the winters were cold, the summers blistering, and neighbors knew everything about you before you even opened your mouth. My parents weren't wealthy people. My daddy was a mechanic, hands always caked in grease, and my mama worked double shifts at the diner just to keep food on the table. We didn't have luxuries, but what we did have was grit. Daddy always said, "Caroline, the world doesn't hand you favors. You build your own." Mama was tougher when life takes your breath. You find a way to breathe through grit teeth. I carried those words with me like armor, but nothing could have prepared me for what life would eventually throw at me. I married young too young, if I'm honest. I was 21 when I met Michael at a county fair. He was tall, had that kind of easy smile that makes you feel safe, and he made me laugh until my sides hurt. We fell in love fast and hard. By the time I was 23, I had a wedding ring on my finger, and at 25, I was holding my baby girl, Anna, in my arms. Anna. Even saying her name now fills me with both joy and ache. She had Michael's deep-set eyes and my stubborn chin. From the moment she was placed in my arms, I felt like the universe had given me its most fragile treasure, and it was my job to guard it at all costs. But life has a way of snatching happiness right out of your hands. Michael died when Anna was just 5. A drunk driver took him away on a rainy night when he was coming back from the hardware store. One phone call, and suddenly I was a widow at 30, staring at a life I had no idea how to navigate. For weeks, I couldn't eat. I'd sit at the kitchen table with the bills piling up, wondering how on earth I was going to raise a child on my own. But every time Anna toddled into the room, dragging her little blanket behind her, I knew giving up wasn't an option. I threw myself into survival. I worked 2 job-stay shifts at a local accounting office and nights cleaning motel rooms. Sleep became a stranger. But I told myself exhaustion was a small price to pay for Anna's smile. I sold Michael's old truck, cried over it later in the dark, and put every dime toward groceries, school supplies, and the tiny savings account I'd started for her college. Anna grew up watching me hustle. Though I tried to shield her from the weight of it, I'd sew her Halloween costumes from scraps, braid her hair in the mornings before school, and clap the loudest at every recital. She was the reason I could push through aching muscles and burning eyes, because her laughter was fuel. Her hugs were medicine, and she adored me too. We had that mother-daughter closeness that people envied. When she was little, she'd crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering, "Mama, you're my safe place." When she was a teenager, she'd tell me secrets about school crushes and ask me to sit with her while she did her homework. Even as she grew into a young woman, I still believed we were each other's anchor, of course. We had our arguments, every mother and daughter does. She'd roll her eyes at my old-fashioned ways, and I'd worry she was too trusting of people. But beneath it all was love, thick and unshakable. At least, I thought it was. When Anna turned 21, she met him. His name was Eric, and from the start, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. He was handsome, charming, in that practiced sort of way. The kind of man who knows how to light up a room by pretending to care about everyone in it. He came from money, or at least he wanted people to think he did. Designer clothes, expensive watch, smooth-talking smile. Anna was smitten instantly. I remember the first dinner she brought him to. He sat at my table, complimented my cooking in a way that felt rehearsed, and spent more time talking about his business ventures than asking about our lives. I asked him what exactly he did, okay? And he gave me an answer so vague it could have been pulled off a business school pamphlet. Still, I bit my tongue because Anna's eyes sparkled when she looked at him. And I didn't want to be the nagging mother who scared off her daughter's happiness. I told myself maybe I was just being protective. Maybe my years of scraping by made me suspicious of anyone who seemed too slick. But the signs grew louder. he started coming between us in little ways. Anna would cancel our Saturday coffee dates because Eric planned something special. When I voiced concerns about how fast things were moving, Anna snapped, "You just don't understand him. Mom, he believes in me." Those words cut deep. Hadn't I believed in her every single day of her life? It got worse. One night after Anna had gone to bed, I overheard Eric in the living room on the phone. His voice was sharp, impatient, nothing like the smooth gentleman act he put on in front of us. He was talking about money, how he needed more of it, how someone was holding out on him. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't a man in love with my daughter. This was a man with an agenda. The next morning, tried to talk to Anna. I told her what I'd heard, that I didn't trust Eric, as she needed to slow down and think about who she was giving her heart to. She looked at me with eyes I'll never forget, cold, wounded, angry. "You're jealous, Mom," she said. "You can't stand the thought of me having someone else to love." That sentence shattered me. After everything I had given up, everything I had fought for, that was what she thought of me. That I was jealous. I cried that night, alone in my bed, wondering where I had gone wrong. But the next day, I dried my tears and reminded myself of what my parents had taught me: grit. I told myself she'd come around, that once she saw the truth, she'd realize I'd only been protecting her. But deep down, fear was gnawing at me, because for the first time in my life, felt like I was losing her. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe you've given your whole life to someone only to feel them slip away into the arms of someone you don't trust. Let me tell you, don't give up. The lessons you've carried all your life, the grit, the wisdom, they're not wasted. They will save you when the storm breaks, because mine was only just beginning. I should have trusted my instincts from the beginning. Life teaches you early on that when something feels off, it usually is. And everything about Eric set my nerves on edge. The way he looked at Anna like she was a trophy he'd won, not a woman with dreams and feelings. The way he laughed too loud, bragged too much, and seemed to know the exact right words to get people on his side. But Ona Mayano was swept up in the whirlwind of it. She was 21, starry-eyed, desperate for romance and adventure after watching me work myself to the bone for most of her childhood. I could see it in her, the hunger for a life that wasn't built on scrubbing motel floors or cutting coupons at the grocery store. And Eric, with his flashy car and his promises of someday, fed that hunger. I'll never forget the night she came home and told me she was moving in with him. We were sitting in the living room, the TV humming quietly in the background. When she turned to me with that mix of excitement and defiance in her eyes, "Mom," she said, "Eric asked me to move in with him." And I said yes. My chest tightened like someone had tied a rope around it and pulled. "Anna," I said slowly, "you've only known him a year. You don't even really know who he is." Her face hardened. "I know enough. He treats me like I matter, Mom. He believes in me, and he wants a future with me. Isn't that what you always wanted for me?" "Yes," I whispered, my throat thick, "but not like this. Not with him." That's when she stood up, her hands clenched at her sides. "You don't get it. You'll never get it. You've been alone so long, you don't know what love looks like anymore." Those words sliced me open. Me, the woman who had sacrificed everything to keep her clothed, fed, and safe. Me, the one who worked myself into the ground just so she could have shoes that fit and textbooks for school. I didn't know what love looked like. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see the truth. But instead, I swallowed my anger and simply said, "If this is what you want, Anna, then I can't stop you. But please, be careful." She didn't hug me goodbye that night. She just walked out, suitcase in hand, and got into Eric's shiny car while he gave me a smug little smirk through the windshield. I stood at the window, watching the taillights disappear, feeling like my heart was being ripped straight out of my chest. The house was quieter after that. Too quiet. I'd find myself setting 2 plates at the table by habit and then sliding one back into the cabinet. I'd fold laundry and catch myself reaching for her shirts only to realize they were gone. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was safe, if she was happy, she'd ever come home to me again. Weeks passed, then months. Anna would call occasionally, but the calls grew shorter, more distant. She'd tell me about the expensive restaurants Eric took her to, the vacations they planned, the new apartment with the city view. Whenever I tried to ask about her job, her studies, or how she was really feeling, she'd change the subject, and then came the first real blow. It was Thanksgiving. I'd cooked all-day turkey stuffing, pumpkin pie, the works. I'd set the table with the good china, the kind Michael and I had bought together when we first got married. I'd been so sure Anna would come that she'd walk through the door and we'd laugh and eat, and maybe, just maybe, things would start to feel normal again. But the hours ticked by, and the seat across from me stayed empty. When I finally called her, she answered with laughter in her voice, music blaring in the background. "Oh, Mom," she said. "Eric surprised me with a trip to Aspen. We're having dinner here with his friends. I meant to call you earlier, but things got crazy." I sat there, clutching the phone, staring at the untouched feast on the table. My voice shook as I said, "I understand, sweetheart. Have a good time." When I hung up, I cried into the pumpkin pie. That was the moment I realized Eric wasn't just pulling Anna away from me, he was erasing me from her life altogether. The months turned into years. Anna stopped calling altogether unless she needed something. Money, advice, a place to crash when she and Eric had one of their fights. And every time I opened my door and my arms, because she was my daughter, my only child. And I couldn't bear to turn her away. But with every visit, I saw more of the truth. I saw the bruises she tried to hide with makeup. It's the way her eyes darted nervously when Eric's name came up. The way she flinched when the phone rang. She'd deny it, of course. "I just fell," she'd say. Or, "You're imagining things, Mom." But I wasn't imagining. I knew. And my blood boiled with rage at the thought of anyone hurting her. The problem was, she didn't want to see it. Or maybe she couldn't. She was too deep in his web to convince that this was love. Too scared of what it would mean to admit the truth. And so I did what mothers do best. I waited, I prayed. I stood ready for the moment she'd finally see him for what he really was. That moment came one rainy night when Anna showed up on my doorstep, soaking wet. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard I thought her chest might cave in. "He's cheating on me, Mom," she wailed. "All this time, he's been lying to me. I gave him everything." And her words broke into sobs again, and I held her tight, my own tears mixing with hers. "You're safe now," I whispered. "You're home." For a few weeks, things were better. She stayed with me, curled up on the couch like she was a teenager again, watching old movies and eating popcorn. We laughed, we talked, we mended some of the cracks that had formed between us. But then, like a moth to flame, she went back to him. I begged her not to. I told her she deserved better, that she was worth more. But she looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Mom, you don't understand. I love him. I can't just walk away." That's when I realized I was fighting not just against Eric, but against Anna's own heart. And that's a battle no mother can win. If you're watching this right now, maybe you've been there. Maybe you've watched someone you love choose the wrong person over and over, no matter how much you try to show them the truth. It's the most helpless feeling in the world. But let me tell you something, don't lose hope. People don't stay blind forever. Sooner or later, the truth always comes to light. And when it does, you'll see just how strong you really are. Because the night Anna finally saw the truth about Eric, it changed everything. The night Anna finally saw the truth about Eric is carved into my memory like a scar that never fades. It was late, close to midnight, when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, I'd been asleep, tucked under the covers with a book on the nightstand, but something in me stirred. That mother's instinct that never really rests. "Mom," her voice cracked on the other end, panicked, broken. "I need you, please. Can you come?" I was already throwing on my coat before she finished. The rain was coming down hard that night, sheets of it slashing across the windshield as I drove. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded with a rhythm I hadn't felt since the day I lost Michael. That old familiar fear of losing someone I loved more than life itself. When I pulled up to her apartment, the front door was wide open. That alone made my stomach drop. I rushed inside, calling her name, and found her sitting on the floor of the living room, knees pulled to her chest, her face a pale mask of despair. "Anna, what happened?" I fell to my knees beside her, pulling her into my arms. She was shaking, trembling so violently I could feel it in my own bones. She lifted her head, mascara streaked like war paint across her cheeks. He brought her here, Mom, to our home. He didn't even care if I walked in. He said I should get used to it, that I'm not enough for him anymore. My breath caught, fury and heartbreak battling inside me. That man had stripped her dignity, her pride, her very sense of self, and he'd done it with a cruel smile, like it was nothing. I wanted to march into his bedroom, drag him out by the collar, and show him exactly what it meant to face a mother's wrath. But instead, I held her tighter and whispered, "You don't have to stay here, Anna. You're coming home with me." She nodded through tears, too broken to argue this time. I helped her gather her things, a few clothes, a box of keepsakes, the shattered pieces of her heart, and we left that apartment for good. Or so I thought. For weeks she stayed with me. We fell into a rhythm again, one I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. She'd sit in the kitchen while I cooked, telling me little stories about work or friends. Sometimes she'd curl up in my lap like she was still a child. And I'd stroke her hair, reminding her she was loved, that she was enough. But healing doesn't come easy, and wounds like hers have a way of festering. One evening, I noticed her on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, her voice hushed and trembling. I didn't need to hear the words to know who it was. My stomach sank. When she came back inside, I asked, "Was that him?" She froze, eyes darting to mine. Then she whispered, "He says he's sorry, Mom. He says he made a mistake. He wants me back. He promises it'll be different this time." I closed my eyes, fighting the storm rising in my chest. "Anna, listen to me. Promises don't mean a thing if the actions never change. You know what he did to you? Don't let him do it again. But, Lavore, the illusion of it can be a stubborn chain." A week later, she packed her bags and left again. I didn't stop her. My tears fell silently as I watched her drive away, the same way I had years earlier. Only this time, the pain was sharper because I knew the cycle was repeating. I knew she was choosing him over me. Again, the months that followed were a blur of silence. She stopped calling altogether. Sometimes I'd hear about her from neighbors or mutual friends, sightings of her and Eric at fancy restaurants. Him buying her jewelry, her wearing smiles that looked too forced to be real. Each story twisted the knife a little deeper. Then came the betrayal that nearly destroyed me. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside were copies of legal documents, deeds, transfers of property, bank accounts drained. My heart stopped as I realized what they were. My daughter had helped Eric strip me of everything I owned. I sat there at the kitchen table, papers spread out before me, the walls closing in. My hands trembled as I read line after line. The cold legal language spelling out the truth, the house Michael and I had built together, the land my father had left me. The savings I'd worked decades to scrape together, it was all gone. And at the bottom of one page, there was her signature, Anna's signature. My daughter had chosen him over me, not just in love, but in loyalty, in blood, in betrayal. I don't remember how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. The sun sank outside, and still I stared at those papers, numb and hollow. My mind replayed every sacrifice I had made, every late night working, every tear I had shed, every moment I had gone without so she could have Miranded. This was what it had come to. For the first time in my life, I felt truly broken. I didn't eat for days. I didn't answer the phone. I couldn't bear to look at the world outside my window. The betrayal sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. But life, I've learned, has a way of pushing you forward whether you want to move or not. Bills still came. Work still needed doing. And slowly, I forced myself to stand, to breathe, to take one small step at a time. That's when the anger set in. Not the wild, destructive kind, but the steady, simmering flame that refuses to be snuffed out. I wasn't going to let Eric or even Anna destroy me. I had survived too much, fought too hard, endured too many battles to let this be the end of my story, so I began to fight back. I called lawyers, combed through records, pieced together the trail of lies and fraud Eric had spun. It was slow, grueling work, the kind of thing that would break a weaker spirit. But every page I turned, every truth I uncovered, fed that flame inside me. And then, one evening, as I sat surrounded by papers and files, I whispered aloud to myself, he thinks he's won. But he hasn't, not yet. If you're listening to this right now. Maybe you know that feeling, the moment when pain turns into determination, when heartbreak turns into resolve. Betrayal can break you, yes, but it can also build a fire in you so strong that nothing can put it out, because that's what betrayal did for me. It gave me the strength to rise, to fight, and to change the ending of my story. And the first step in that journey was exposing the truth. When people talk about betrayal, they usually focus on the wound, the sharp, burning pain that slices through your heart when someone you love chooses to hurt you. But what they don't talk about is the silence that comes after, the long echo of that wound. The nights when you lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every missed sign, every little detail you ignored. That silence can consume you if you let it. I let it eat at me for a while. I won't lie. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I cared to admit. I woke up to the sound of my own sobbing more than once. I felt like a fool, like a naive girl instead of a seasoned woman who should have known better. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that my own daughter had signed those papers. Her hand had guided the pen, her heart had sided with him. And her betrayal was the knife that cut deepest of all. But I didn't stay down. One morning, after another sleepless night, I walked to the bathroom mirror, looked at the hollow woman staring back at me, and said out loud, enough. My voice cracked, but the words stuck. Enough. I had lived too much life to let this be the ending. I'd survived burying my husband, raising a child alone, working 2 jobs, losing friends, losing family, and nearly losing myself in the process. And here I was, still standing. If I could endure all of that, I could fight this dot. So I began to gather my strength in the only way I knew how. Slowly. Piece by piece. One small step at a time. The first step was knowledge. If Eric thought he could outsmart me with his fancy suits, slick words, and underhanded tricks, he had underestimated the wrong woman. I called my friend Claire, an old classmate who had gone on to become a paralegal. We hadn't spoken much in years, but when she heard the tremor in my voice, she dropped everything and came right over. We sat at my kitchen table, a pot of coffee between us, papers spread out like a battlefield. This looks like fraud, she said after an hour of scanning through the documents. She pointed to a signature line. See this? The dates don't match. And here's this notarization. I know this office. They shut down 2 years ago. Hope flickered in me for the first time in months. So he messed up. She nodded. Oh, he messed up big time. And if we dig deeper, I bet we'll find more. And dig we did. For weeks, Claire and I combed through everything: bank statements, property records, even emails Anna had sent me over the years that hinted at Eric's manipulations. Claire taught me how to read between the lines, how to spot the inconsistencies, how to recognize when someone had tried to cover their tracks. The more we uncovered, the angrier I became. But it wasn't the wild, reckless anger of before. This was something else, something sharper, steadier. Like a blade forged in fire, my anger had turned into resolve. Then came the twist I never saw coming. One night, while sifting through a box of old files Anna had left behind during one of her brief stays with me, I found a folder labeled Eric Personal. Inside were receipts, dozens of them for expensive hotel stays, jewelry, and dinners. At first, I thought these were gifts for Anna, proof of his so-called generosity. But then I looked closer. The dates didn't add up. The hotel stays didn't match trips Anna had mentioned. The jewelry receipts didn't match anything I'd ever seen her wear. And then there it was, a hotel invoice with 2 names on it. Eric's and another woman's. I sat there with the paper in my hand, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. My poor daughter. Not only had he stolen from me, but he had humiliated her, cheated on her, made a fool out of the very woman who had given him everything. I wanted to run to her right then, to show her the evidence, to make her see. But a voice inside whispered, "Not yet. Build the case. Be patient. The truth must be undeniable." So I kept quiet and kept digging. Claire helped me contact an investigator she trusted. A retired detective named Bill. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, slow-moving, but his eyes were sharp as glass. He listened to my story, flipped through the files, and said, "Lady, you've got yourself a rat here. But don't worry, we're going to smoke him out." Bill started tailing Eric, gathering photos, videos, records. He discovered hidden bank accounts, shell companies, even a girlfriend in another state. Piece by piece, Eric's shiny image crumbled into dust, and as the truth surfaced, something shifted in me. For so long, I had carried the weight of betrayal like a stone strapped to my chest. But now, with every new discovery, that weight began to lift. I wasn't powerless, I wasn't broken. I was a fighter again, just like I had always been. The hardest part, though, was Anna. She still wasn't speaking to me. Months had passed since she left, and every attempt I made to reach out was met with silence. I worried she was too deep under his spell to ever come back. But I also knew that eventually, the lies would catch up to him. The truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across my porch, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I stepped outside, and there she was. Anna, she looked, older somehow, worn down. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes hollow, her smile forced. My heart broke all over again just seeing her. "Mom," she whispered, her voice so small I had to strain to hear it. I walked toward her, every instinct screaming to pull her into my arms, but I held back, waiting. She swallowed hard. "He's not who I thought he was." Tears pricked my eyes, but I nodded. "I know, sweetheart." And in that moment, I knew she had finally seen the truth. But what I didn't know, what neither of us knew, was that this was only the beginning of a storm that would shake our lives to the core. When Anna showed up at my doorstep that evening, it was like the air had been knocked out of me. I had played out this moment in my head so many times, imagined the words I'd say, the tears we'd cry, the hug that would heal us both. But when it finally happened, when she stood there trembling in the fading light, all I could do was whisper her name like a prayer. Anna. She stepped into the porch light, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. Her lips pressed tight as though she was holding back an ocean of words. For a moment, we just stood there. 2 stubborn women, bound by love and hurt and blood. Then, finally, she broke. "I was wrong, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I was so wrong." And before I knew it, she was in my arms, sobbing like she hadn't since she was a little girl. I held her as tightly as I could, afraid that if I let go, she might slip away again. My tears mingled with hers, and in that moment, the months of pain and silence melted into something softer, something that felt like forgiveness. We sat on the porch for hours, the cicadas humming their chorus in the background. As she told me everything. "He lied to me," she whispered, staring down at her hands. "About the money, about the trips, even about loving me. I thought he cared, Mom. I thought he was different." My chest ached as I listened. This was my daughter, the baby I had rocked through fevers, the teenager I had stayed up waiting for on prom night, the woman I had walked down the aisle on her wedding day. And now she was broken, betrayed, discarded by the man she had trusted. I wanted to come back sooner, she said through her tears. But I was too proud. I didn't want you to be right. I didn't want to admit I'd chosen him over you, but I took her hand in mine. Sweetheart, being right doesn't matter. What matters is you're here now, and we're going to get through this together. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in months, hope, that night. For the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. But the battle wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. The next morning, I laid everything out for another receipts, the forged documents, the investigators' findings. At first, she flinched as though each piece of evidence was a slap across the face. But then her expression hardened. Her sorrow began to shift into anger, righteous and fierce. How could he? She hissed, clutching the hotel invoice in her trembling hands. How could I have been so blind? Because you loved him, I said gently. And love can blind us all. But now we see clearly. And now we fight. With Bill's help, we filed a case. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, the list of charges against Eric grew longer by the day. Claire worked with us, helping draft statements, organizing evidence, making sure every detail was airtight. But the real test came when we decided to confront him directly. It wasn't my idea, truthfully. I wanted to let the courts handle it. But Anna insisted. She said she needed to look him in the eye, to reclaim the power he had stolen from her. So we arranged to meet him at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. Bill sat at a nearby table pretending to read the paper, his camera pen recording everything. When Eric walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He still wore his expensive suit and polished shoes, but something about him had changed. His eyes darted around nervously, his jaw clenched tight, his charm forced. The mask was cracking. Anna, he said smoothly, sliding into the seat across from us, and Linda. He gave me a curt nod, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. Anna didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her voice steady. We know everything, Eric. He smirked. Do you? She pulled the hotel receipt from her purse and laid it on the table. Then another, and another. His smirk faltered. We know about the accounts, the shell companies, the girlfriend in Chicago. Her voice grew stronger with each word. And we know about the forged documents. You tried to steal my mother's life savings. For the first time, I saw fear flash across his face. Just a flicker, but it was there. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice rising slightly. These are misunderstandings. Save it. I cut in, my tone sharper than I'd intended. We have the evidence, Eric, and soon the police will too. His mask cracked fully then. He leaned back, his smile gone, his voice dripping with venom. You think you've won? You're nothing. Both of you. Weak, bitter women clinging to scraps. Anna's hand shook under the table, but her eyes stayed locked on his. No, Eric, we're stronger than you'll ever be, and you're going to pay for what you've done. For a moment, the air between us was so tense I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Eric stood abruptly, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. I exhaled shakily, realizing I had been holding my breath. Anna reached across the table and gripped my hand, her eyes shining with tears. We did it, Mom. We faced him. Squeezed her hand back. This is just the beginning. But, yes, we did it. The legal process was long, exhausting, and draining in ways I hadn't imagined. But through it all, Anna stood beside me. We attended hearings, gave testimonies, answered endless questions. And slowly, piece by piece, justice took shape. Eric was arrested for fraud and embezzlement. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. He tried to squirm out of it, tried to shift blame. But the evidence was undeniable. The day the judge sentenced him, Anna and I sat together in the courtroom, our hands intertwined. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over me. Not joy, not quite, but something close. Vindication. Afterward, Anna turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. For choosing him over you. For doubting you. For hurting you. I cupped her face in my hands. Sweetheart, we've both been hurt. But look at us now. We survived. And that's what matters. We walked out of that courthouse with our heads held high. For the first time in months, I felt free. And that night, as we sat on my porch again, sipping sweet tea and watching the fireflies dance in the dark, I realized something profound. Betrayal hadn't broken me. It had built me. It had forced me to dig deep, to rediscover my strength, to rise above dots. And maybe, just maybe, that was the gift hidden in the pain. So, to the women watching this, to those of you who have been betrayed, abandoned, or left behind, I want you to know this. Your story isn't over. You still have chapters left to write. You have skills, wisdom, and strength that time and hardship have carved into you. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, another woman needs to hear this story. Another woman needs to know she isn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that woman is you. The morning after Eric was sentenced, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt a deep, quiet peace in my chest. The chaos had ended. The lies were behind us. And for once, the silence in my house didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. Anna was still asleep in the guest room, exhausted after weeks of court hearings and emotional battles. I padded into the kitchen, brewed myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table staring out the window. The steam curled into the morning light, and as I sipped, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. I thought about the journey I had just survived, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the near loss of my daughter, the fear that I might lose everything I had worked for. And yet, here I was, stronger, wiser, and somehow more alive than before. I realized then that surviving wasn't enough. I didn't want to just get by, wanted to thrive. I wanted to take the lessons carved into me by betrayal and turn them into something meaningful, something that could outlive the pain. That morning marked the beginning of my new chapter. When Anna woke up, she found me at the table with a notebook open, scribbling furiously. She blinked at me sleepily. "What are you doing, Mom?" Smiled. "I'm writing down everything I've learned. Every mistake, every choice, every lesson. Because if I don't, all this pain will have been for nothing." She sat across from me, sipping her own coffee, her eyes still puffy from the tears she had cried the day before. "You're really something. You know that?" I laughed softly. "I'm just a woman who's lived long enough to know that wisdom means nothing if you don't use it." And use it, I did. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into projects. At first, it was small things: cleaning out the garage, repainting the living room, tending to the neglected flower beds. Physical work gave me clarity, and each finished task made me feel capable again. But soon, I realized I wanted to do more than just fix up my home. I wanted to fix up my life, so I started teaching. Not in a school, but in the community center downtown. They had a program for women starting over, women who had been widowed, divorced, or abandoned, who needed help learning new skills to support themselves. I offered to teach them what I knew best: bookkeeping, budgeting, and running a small business. After all, I had managed my own household for decades, balanced every bill, stretched every dollar. I had helped my late husband with his business back in the day. I knew more than I gave myself credit for. The first class was small, just 5 women sitting in metal folding chairs, looking at me like I was some kind of miracle worker. But as I spoke, something inside me lit up. Their eyes widened when I showed them how to track expenses. Their pens flew across their notebooks as I explained how to save for emergencies. They asked questions, shared stories, cried, and laughed by the end of the night. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. One woman hugged me afterward and whispered, "You don't know how much I needed this. You made me believe I can actually make it." That night, I cried in my car. Not tears of sadness, but of joy. Because for the first time since my life had fallen apart, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was helping others survive too. Word spread quickly, and soon my classes grew. The center added more nights, and eventually, was leading workshops on financial independence, small business planning, even personal healing. Women came with notebooks, hungry for knowledge. Some brought their daughters. Some brought friends. I've watched them grow in confidence, watched them take control of their lives. And every time one of them said, "I did it," I felt like I had done it too. Anna supported me every step of the way. She attended some of my classes, not as a student, but as a cheerleader. She saw firsthand the impact I was making, and it helped her heal too. She began volunteering at the center, mentoring younger women, sharing her own story of heartbreak and resilience. Watching her grow into her own strength was the sweetest gift I could ask for. But life, as it always does, had one last twist for me. One evening, after a class, a woman approached me quietly. She was in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a soft voice. She leaned in and said, "You should write a book." I laughed nervously. "A book? About what?" "About this," she said, gesturing around the room. "About what you've been through. About what you're teaching us. Women need this. Not just here, but everywhere." The thought stuck with me. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the idea. Could I really write a book? Would anyone care what I had to say? Then I remembered the night I sat at my kitchen table scribbling lessons into a notebook. I remembered the pain that had driven me there, and the women who had told me I'd given them hope. And I realized, yes, I could do this. So I began to write. It wasn't easy. At first, the words came slow, halting, messy. I doubted myself constantly. But with every page, I poured my heart onto paper, the betrayal, the grief, the rebuilding, the triumph. I wrote not to relive the pain, but to show how I had turned it into something greater. Months later, I held the first printed copy in my hands. The title gleamed up at me, Stronger Than Betrayal. My story, my lessons, my truth. I self-published at first, handing out copies at the community center, sharing them with friends. But soon, word spread beyond our little town. Local newspapers wrote articles about me. A regional magazine featured my story. And one day, I received an invitation to speak at a women's conference. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of women, I felt a lump in my throat. I wasn't famous. I wasn't wealthy. I was just a 55-year-old woman who had been broken and put herself back together again. But as I spoke, I realized that was exactly why they were listening. Because I was them, and they were me. When I finished my speech, the room erupted in applause. Women lined up to hug me, to share their own stories, to thank me. I went home that night and cried again, overwhelmed by the sheer power of shared strength. My relationship with Anna grew stronger through it all. We were no longer just mother and daughter. We were partners in healing, warriors who had survived the same storm. She eventually went back to school, earning a degree in social work, determined to help other women who had been betrayed or abused. I couldn't have been prouder. Looking back now, I can see the beauty in the pain. Eric thought he was destroying me, but instead, he gave me the greatest gift, the chance to rebuild myself into someone stronger, wiser and more compassionate than I had ever been. And if you're watching this, if you've been betrayed, abandoned, or hurt, I want you to hear me loud and clear. Your story is not over. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much you've lost, or how broken you feel, you can rise again. You have wisdom, you have strength, and you have the power to rewrite your future. Don't let betrayal be the last word in your story. Let survival, resilience, and triumph be the words that define you. And if you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because I believe in you. I believe in your strength. And I believe that one day you'll look back at the pain you're in now and say, that was the moment I found myself again. That's my story. Not one of defeat, but of victory. Not one of bitterness, but of purpose. And if I could survive this, so can you.